All right, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, an American literary classic, one that I've been interested in reading for a long time, because it's pretty diverse. It's a pretty divisive book. It's pretty controversial, and I don't mean more really in the content, language and stuff. I mean that people there's generally two camps. People tend to love it, or people tend to hate it. And really, one of the key things, I think, really the key thing between liking it or hating it is whether or not you like the main character, Holden Caulfield. Now, I'll get into that, and I'll get into Holden and everything, but let me just make sure that I'm running through, hitting all the points that I need to. Um, to summarize this book, it's basically Holden Caulfield, the main character, narrating events that happened about a year ago. He's 17 years old, and he's actually in a mental hospital at the time of him telling the story. However, the story takes place about a year earlier, whenever he's 16, within the time span of being kicked out of Pensy Prep, a school that he was in, and coming back home to his parents from being kicked out during the break. And him and everything in between, him basically hiding in New York, spending his nights in hotels, getting into all kinds of mischief, trying to um, wait off on coming home, so he has so he so as to avoid the brunt of his parents finding out, the brunt of his parents' reaction to finding out he's being kicked out. So I think the theme of this, which I will dig into deeper a bit later, but to just outright state it in a nutshell, would be to preserve your innocence and to be authentic. Those are the key points. To make sure that you're being real with yourself at all times, and to never lose touch of your innocence, of who you were, who you are. Um, I really enjoyed this book. I would absolutely recommend it to a friend. Now, it's not a book for everyone. Not everyone's going to enjoy it. I think I can definitely understand why people might not like Holden Caulfield and why they might not like the book, because the whole book is told from his perspective. And if you don't like how he talks, if you don't like the writing style, then you're not going to have a fun time. But regardless of whether or not you end up liking it, I think it's worth a try checking out, because I really do think that it's earned its status as a classic. Um, and I think that Holden Caulfield is one of the finest characters in all of literature. Um, Certainly one of the most defined, in my opinion. Holden himself is a pretty jaded, cynical young man, but he's also pretty intelligent. He does have a heart. He can be sincere, although he rarely shows it. And he's very perceptive. We see him being very perceptive very early on in the book, and he just carries on through that way. We see him kind of disembowel his teacher, Mr. Spencer's kind of speech about him not caring with. He knows, he's heard it all before. He's heard all the certain platitudes said by him. It's all repeated to him. It's all the same. He recognizes that it's all just kind of this act. It's there's nothing real about him. There's nothing real about him saying this. We see he's constantly remarking on things, giving his take on the world. And we see him even kind of manipulate some people with his perceptiveness. He meets someone on the bus, a woman by the name of Miss Morrow, who is the mother of one of his fellow students at Pensy Prep, or one of the students he was acquainted with at Pensy Prep while he was there. And he plays her like a fiddle in how he has a conversation with her about how he talks about it like it's a game, how he's reeling her in with all this information, this description of her son, which doesn't really have any truth to it, doesn't have any weight to it. He's not doing it out of he's not really being real with her, but he's toying with her. He knows what she expects. He knows what'll get her interested, and so he uses that to his advantage just for his own entertainment. We see this whenever he goes on a date later in the book, and he sets up, even though he himself is not a fan of the activities that he does, he sets up these events to go on, these events for them to do, that he knows she'll enjoy, that he knows that she'll just love. So he's very perceptive, although just because he is perceptive doesn't make him reliable all the time. You can definitely tell there's some revisionism in the book. You can tell Holden's either he's withholding information, or a lot of the times he doesn't want to open up. he's been through a lot of emotional trauma. That's something you have to understand. His brother Ali died from cancer, and he was very close to him, and he's kind of been shuffled around from school to school, town to town, not really ever really getting to cope with that, never being able to reconcile with that loss. And that's going to take a toll on you. And you can see why he's got kind of this bitter worldview, and why he's reluctant to be completely honest and to be completely open, even though, honesty and authenticity are something that he cares about deeply, things that he appreciates, and things that, that don't inhabit those qualities, or that don't exhibit that quality, sorry, he criticizes. Um, Forgive me, I got some notes here just to make sure that I'm being cohesive with my thoughts. Basically, we see the theme of innocence and authenticity in the way that children are treated with the novel, I guess. Holden Caulfield, the only people that he really ever talks good, fondly of, are kids. His kid brother Ali, who died, his kid sister Phoebe is the only person who he really has a close connection with that we get to see. And he loves her deeply, and he's constantly praising her. Something that he doesn't do with anybody else in the novel. Um, there's his neighbor Jane, from a while that he knew previously, I believe from either a few summers ago or the past summer, who he formed a bond with, a friendship with, and he talks very highly of her. But also, whenever he learns that one of his roommates, Eric Stradlater, went on a date with, who is a womanizer, who's notorious for, I'll say, being promiscuous with them, obviously. He doesn't want to think of her like that. He refuses to think of her as a sexual object, or as anyone who would do something like that. He thinks solely of her as she was previously. He thinks only of the Jane that he knew. He kind of doesn't want to let go of her perhaps maturing. And we see that he doesn't really get along with any of the boys his age either. He doesn't get along with any of the people at Pensy Prep. He doesn't have a close relationship with them, in the same way that he does with kids. The very title of the book, The Catcher in the Rye, comes from this vision that Holden has, or rather this kind of dream, this kind of thing that he comes up with, where he feels like he's a catcher in a field of rye, as all these kids are about to go off this cliff. His job is to catch them and to bring them in close from falling. He feels like he has to literally guard innocence. It's a pretty obvious theme. You don't really have to be a major sleuth to find it out, but also at the same time, it's not necessarily as directly stated as in something like The Lord of the Flies, where they kind of come out and say it. It's pretty good, and obviously authenticity, being true to yourself, being real, fighting against kind of the phoniness of the world, as it will, is pretty major, as just we see Holden disembowel anything that is not real, that is not genuine, that doesn't fit his idea of what things should be. So yeah, that's basically Holden. That's basically the theme of the book. That's Catcher in the Rye. Really enjoyed the book. I think it's incredible. I would recommend it highly. Definitely worth the read. Definitely worth checking out. I don't know that you'll like it. I don't know that it's for everyone, but I can say that it manages to hit some pretty amazing points. It manages to make you feel a lot of emotional highs, makes you feel a lot of emotional lows. Really, really an incredible book.